6th National Meeting and Exposition in Boston. We're joined by Dr. Bikram Subedi and Ms. Tara Croft from Murray State University. They're reporting that illicit drug use could be higher than previously thought and soars during special events. Dr. Subedi?
Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk here about our research finding. Let me begin with why this research is important, what we found, and what is our next step. As all we know, we are under the national national emergency on public health, particularly the opioid abuse, we just want to utilize our knowledge of analytical chemistry to solve or to address some of our issues in our communities. It's a global problem, it's a global concern of drug abuse now. So that's what we're doing. We, first of all, to minimize those socioeconomic consequences of all this drug abuse, the foremost important thing we need to do is we need to quantify how much drug is actually consumed in communities. That will be the foremost important thing to know. And there are several approaches, conventional approaches, I would say, that utilize to determine the consumption rate in communities, the consumption rate of drugs in communities. And they're totally based on some survey questionnaires, self-reported information, and some hospital admission and drug-related crime statistics. But at the end, what it does it's typically underestimate the actual consumption rate of drugs in community. Our technique we call sewage epidemiology, or it's also called the wastewater-based epidemiology. It utilizes, we get this wastewater sample from the wastewater facility, the raw wastewater called wastewater effluent, and we determine the level of different varieties of drugs, the illicit drugs as well as the neuropsychiatric drugs in a pretty trace level, and we back calculate the community consumption of those drugs utilizing several the wastewater parameters such as excretion, the water inflow, and the population served by the community. And the next step will be the approach that we are utilizing now only determines the total consumption, the total amount of drug consumed in a community. However, we cannot pinpoint whose sub-communities are responsible to consume that much drugs. So our next step will be to move upstream into the sub-community level, get the wastewater samples, provided that no privacy and no proprietary informations are violated, and provided that we will have enough fund to do those things, then we will be able to go to the sub-community level, and that will be really useful information for the law enforcement to pinpoint the hotspots of drug consumption. That will be our next step, and we want to continue this study, and we want to scale up this study to a national level, nationwide study. I think.
Thank you. Are there any questions? And please state your name and affiliation before asking your question.
Bill Busley, ACS. Now that we've got all this information, and it's kind of surprising that its magnitude is greater than I expected, particularly in the Midwest and so forth, where there are more septic tanks than actual sewer systems and so forth. What do we do with it, and what do we do to prevent all this problem? Because this gets serious.
Mm-hmm. So you mean how do we
essentially this? What do we do with the data to kind of direct perhaps law enforcement agencies or the medical community or somebody to be able to react or
Quite.
well, not even react, prevent all all this thing, because obviously you're not going to change people's behavior and so forth. But seeing it something like this, I mean, these events are not Woodstock or something of this sort, but it becomes really a serious problem.
Yes, it is.
So there's it's not a strictly chemical thing, because the chemical part is the analysis. But what do we do with it?
Let me answer that question this way. Well, you know what? In Europe, there's a consortium among 30 different countries, and they're monitoring in a routine base. They're monitoring the wastewater. All these drugs in wastewater, and they generate the data, and they have a really good coordination with the law enforcement. And these both approaches, the conventional approach that the law enforcement is utilizing now, as well as our CU epidemiology technique, these both approaches can be really complementary to each other. So they're kind of pulling all the data from the both approaches, and they're acting. And they're being successful on that one. Relatively successful on that one. In Australia, recently had a wastewater monitoring national program, and they're also going on that direction. But it's really unfortunate that even this concept has been coined here in US EPA, and the United States is, of course, one of the major consumer of all these drugs, but still we're not being able to proliferate this type of research here in the United States, and we're not being utilizing all these sewage epidemiology derived data to combat those our socioeconomic issues in our community. So overall, what would be the best is definitely to coordinate the different parties, the government, the research academia, or some other agencies, and to work together. That would be the best way, I think, because our technique is already proven to have to be a complementary approach to that conventional technique.
Now, one more question.
Please.
This looks like it would present a rather good opportunity for research on eliminating pollution due to illegal substances and so forth, because of course I can't think of any better place to isolate microorganisms than ones that have the opportunity to metabolize and then just find the right one. It's really a kind of a shoot fish in a barrel kind of thing, but still it would give an opportunity, which is the positive side of it. There's not much positive side of illegal drugs, but that may be one of the things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of challenges. It is still growing. We're expanding and we're improving. And as analytical chemists, there's so many uncertainties on each and every step of this approach. We're just improving, and that's why we need more research. So more research on each correction factor that we utilize to do those calculations. So we just need to expand this research furthermore to minimize the uncertainties on determination. So that's our goal. And we'll be working on those areas of research, and we need more research on those areas.
Okay.
Thank you.
Katie Cottingham, ACS. So were you looking for the drugs themselves or for like the metabolites in your
Great
analysis?
question. Well, we kind of monitoring both. For some of the drugs, they excrete in the form they excrete predominantly in the form of parent drugs. But some of the drugs, let's say cocaine, about 45% of cocaine is excrete in the form of benzalkonium. So it's its metabolite, and not only it excrete at a higher rate, but it's also stable in wastewater. So it does not undergo the transformation into the transformation product as much as its parent drug does. So we utilize benzalkonium that's a metabolite of cocaine, to determine the consumption rate of cocaine in community. But some of the drugs like methamphetamine it's not absolutely stable, but it is enough. It has enough stability on wastewater, so we utilize methamphetamine, its own concentration methamphetamine, to determine the consumption rate of methamphetamine. So it again all depends what proportion it excretes, at what rate it does excrete, and whether it is stable or not, and whether we can quantify that particular metabolite with enough precision or not. We utilize metabolites as well as the parent drugs.
And which drugs were you looking for?
There's several drugs actually. There's several illicit drugs such as cocaine, stimulant cocaine. It's several metabolites, methamphetamine, amphetamine, and some narcotics, heroin. It's metabolite, MDMA, ecstasy, some MDMA, MDA, and THC, of course, hallucinogens, and so many varieties of neuropsychiatric drugs, some anti-schizophrenic, antidepressant. We have 36 different drugs and their metabolites in a single method that we are capable of determining all this consumption rate.
And which holidays were you targeting? Which events?
Great. So we actually targeted the July 4th, which is the national holiday, it's a festive event, and we know we can presume, if there's a gathering, the people might have been consuming drugs. People might have been high on something, but we did not know that what the level the people are high on. So our method was able to determine the level at which the people were high at during the July 4th. And also, we also targeted the non-festive events, such as the 2017, the solar eclipse. And it was quite interesting, actually. We monitored two small communities, about 20,000, 25,000 population in western Kentucky. They are almost 50 miles apart, and they're both in the same state, so abide by similar, same rules and regulations. And we found one community consume statistically significantly higher level of all these drugs, such as cocaine, methamphetamine, amphetamine, morphine, methadone, compared to the another community. And recently, actually, Tara can go further. Actually, recently we have kind of performed another experiment.
Yes, we applied this method to two communities, two wastewater treatment facilities in eastern Kentucky that had approximately 10 times the population of the communities in western and about twice the income. And we found differences in drug trends there as well. They have a higher consumption rate of cocaine in the eastern communities, whereas in western communities it's more methamphetamine, amphetamine, and THC. So just seeing the differences in drug consumption.
Interesting. And how did your results compare to, say, national estimates, government estimates of opioid use and other drug use? Were you surprised by your findings?
Yes, we did actually. We compared our estimate through our method versus the UNODC, United Nations Office of Drug and Crime. They estimate the drug consumption in communities in global scale, and the SAMHSA and UNODC, the national survey. The national survey and the SAMHSA determine the consumption rate in the different states in the United States. We compared our estimate with both of those estimates, and what we found was the cocaine consumption from our method in those communities in western Kentucky is lower than the UNODC and the SAMHSA's estimation. However, the methamphetamine consumption rate, the percentage of population that consuming methamphetamine and amphetamine in western Kentucky is 2 to 4 times higher than the national as well as the UNODC estimate.
I had a question. Does this have implications for prescription drug abuse? And, do you kind of measure that with what you would expect a normal population to have versus what is actually showing up in the wastewater?
Our technique actually cannot distinguish whether it was the prescribed drug as well as whether it was drug abuse, really. For an example, morphine. What we found in those two communities was about 30% of the population were consuming morphine. But it is not necessarily that it was completely abused because morphine is the active ingredients of so many different type of prescribed drugs, such as ethyl morphine, nicomorphine, even codeine. So they also undergoes the transformation and produce morphine. So that's one of the drawback of our method, but at least we can understand at what level in different spatial event or in a particular day was consumed at what level. So those things we can determine though.
Thank you. All right, the archived version of this session will soon be posted at bit.ly/ACSLive_Boston 2018. And please join us for our next press conference at 10:30 a.m. today on lithium-ion batteries that can't catch fire because they harden on impact. Thank you.